Greetings. My name is Kate Rademacher, and I'm here with Writing for Your Life. And I'm really, really delighted to be joined by an author friend and colleague, Matt Brough. Matt is based in Canada, and we've known each other for several years. He's been really supportive of me on my writing journey, and we've become friends and colleagues in the process. So I'm really excited to be here today talking about one of his new books and to hear about his writing journey because it's very diverse and it seems very exciting and interesting. I'm reading one of the books in the series that we're going to be talking about today, the Ryder series. It's really fun and well written and exciting. And so it's been fun to read. And Matt, I'm just excited to have you. So thank you so much.
It's really great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to this conversation, Kate. And it's so great to see you again and talk to you again after having you as a guest on my old podcast a couple of times.
Yeah, well, it's been really, as I said, really fun to get to know you, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your writing. So tell us if
Sure.
you can just start off by telling me and us about sort of your background, remind us where of Canada you live, what your day job is, and how you got into the writing life, and a little bit about sort of where you are now. Thanks. That's a big question.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a pastor, like you said, in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. So I'm in Winnipeg, which is kind of right in the middle, east-west middle of Canada. Um, and it's a lovely, lovely place. It just snowed last week. So mid-October is when we usually get our snow, and it's still there on the ground. It's snowing right now, actually. So
Wow.
yeah, we get cold for lots of the year, and we get very hot for the summer. And I've lived here most of my life. I was born in the UK, but my family moved here when I was just 2 years old, and I've grew up in Winnipeg. And the only time I've really been away is when I was at seminary, and church planted here. Um, and so I've done all kinds of different things. Today, kind of talking about writing, I've obviously kind of written a lot for my job, if we can call it that, and in school. So I've written lots of sermons and articles, things like that. But I'd always been interested in writing fiction of some kind. I had so many starts on something sitting on my computer, and I remember like starting writing plays. Like I thought, oh, I had ideas for plays, for scripts, and honestly, I got maybe, you know, no more than maybe 10 pages in, and that was it on any project. So it just never really clicked. And it was the year I was turning 40 that suddenly kind of stumbled into this story, the book that you're reading. And really, it just sort of happened. A couple of things happened all at the same time that got that to sort of stick. I wrote the first draft of that novel in about 3 months after having, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 just ideas of like maybe I could write something that's fiction or a play or something like that. So it just sort of clicked all of a sudden for me. One of them was my daughter was 5 years old at the time, and I've always loved Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia, and I just thought, like, what do I think she would want to read when she was about 10 years old? And we could already tell at age 5 she already liked books and enjoyed reading, and she still does, and she's 13 now. So I just thought, I was thinking to myself, like, maybe I should write something for her that I think she would love. And that got me thinking, well, what did I love? Like, what did I like? And I was not a big reader. I'm still kind of a slow reader, actually. But I was a reluctant reader. I didn't enjoy reading. I loved movies, still do. And but Lord of the Rings was kind of the first thing that I read that in grade 8 that sort of clicked for me, that I was like, oh wait, I can like books. Like, I didn't even know that I liked books until I read The Hobbit, basically. And yeah, so basically, when I got into this story, kind of thinking, what would she love? It just sort of clicked for me, and 3 months later, I had a first draft, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. Um, and I learned about self-publishing at the same time. So there were a couple of podcasts I was listening to that were talking about self-publishing, and it just sounded interesting to me. Like, it just seemed like, oh, I can just do this myself and not have to worry about agents or, or like I was so naive. I had no idea about the publishing world, and I just thought, oh, well, this seems like I can just do it. Like so I just will. Like it was just
Wow.
really like I had no clue what I was doing really. So I just read a lot and researched how to self-publish, and that opened up this whole journey. So that was now 9 years ago, almost
Wow.
9 years ago, that I started writing that. And now I've got 4 books in that series, a prequel novella in that series, and then I've
Wow.
written 3 other books that are kind of adult spirituality books. And I've helped my mom publish her books, and a friend published 2 of his books. So that seems like a lot. Yeah, seems like a lot in 9 years, but so been quite the journey. So I'm still doing self-publishing, and it's a lot of fun.
Wow. Congratulations. Well, I mean, I would love to hear about the Del Ryder series. And then I'd love to ask you some questions about self-publishing and what you're doing now. I know you're doing a Kickstarter campaign
Yeah.
and have sort of repackaged in the book, and I want to hear all about that. But before we get into the details, because I'm personally, just full disclosure, I'm thinking about publishing a book of poetry with my husband, and so I'm sort of like
That's great.
thinking about everything with fresh eyes, including self-publishing. So this is very timely for me too, to just say like, what are the pros and cons, and like to really talk to trusted colleagues and friends about,
Right.
and including in the industry. I think one of the blessings of being involved with Writing for Your Life is now I'm getting to meet more publishers and understand more of that side of things. So, I think things are really changing and have changed in the time. I mean, I became a writer in exactly that same time, I think, and worked with an independent publisher and then a traditional press. So anyway, we have lots to talk about, but tell
Yeah.
us first about Del Ryder, and it's a female protagonist, which I love. And one of the questions I had when I was starting to read this is, I know Matt's a pastor. Like, is this, is it, and I know he's a faith-based writer, like, is there faith in this book? And so, it's interesting because the word mysticism or mystic is on the back. And one of the first characters you encounter on page 1 is a priest. So
Right.
like, I was like, okay, this shows up a
Who,
little bit, but tell us
who
about,
actually seem
this.
Yeah, the priest actually seems like a villain
Yeah,
initially, so
that's true.
we'll see. I won't give that away, but
Okay.
yeah, like yes, there are faith elements in the story. I mean, that's the short answer. And there's a few things that are like, maybe I would have done this differently if I was going back. But yeah, like it's. I'm a big fan of Tolkien, as I've said. I'm more of a fan of Tolkien than I am of Lewis. So I didn't approach this as like I'm going to write an allegory. Like I didn't do that. I just wrote what I thought was a fun adventure story that a 10-year-old would enjoy reading. And it turns out I always say like the books are really for kind of grade 4 to grade 6 or adults. And because teenagers, there's not enough angst, there's not enough vampires in love with zombies or like whatever it is, like I don't have any of that. Like it's just kind of, these are kids, they're friends, there's no romantic, well, there's like very minor romantic interest. But yeah, it's just a fun adventure story, and it's a fantasy, like a light fantasy story. um, and it's very similar to like the concept of Narnia. They go to another world and they encounter this other world, and it's quite different than the world that they live in. So there's these creatures that can transform into different shapes, and they glow. Everything's glowing, and this light is disappearing from their world. And the creatures they meet believe that these kids have been sent there to save their world and to bring the light back, and the kids have no clue about that. So the first book is kind of about this decision. They're starting to care about these creatures that they've met. Should we stay? Like, should we stay and help them, even though we know we haven't been sent here for this? It was accidental that we got here. Or are we just really trying to work to try to figure out how we get home? It's actually also a little bit like Wizard of Oz in that way. Like I didn't think about this when I was writing the book, but after I'd finished it and read my own book out loud to my daughter, I realized, oh, this is kind of like Wizard of Oz. Like I didn't mean to do that, but I guess that story formed me more than, more than I thought it did. But there's this young girl. She's got three male friends actually who go with her. She's kind of a she's a girl who is active and right involved with all the things that the boys are doing, um, and she and so it's kind of like Wizard of Oz. There's these three helpers that are along the way that are all male. She even at one point, I don't know if you got this far in the book, she meets a little fuzzy character, Tabby, that's like this little creature, and I'm like, oh, I even put Toto in the book by accident. I wasn't thinking of that. And it really is this journey story of them like finding like how do we figure out how to get home, and it's not an obvious journey. Like they've the same as Wizard of Oz. It's like, how are we figuring out how to get home? Well, we'll go get help, and we don't really know where that help's going to come from. So it's influenced very much by that story, which kind of surprised me myself. But yeah, there's like a god character in the story, but again, that was unplanned when I started writing. That character just sort of showed up and went, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm a pastor and a Christian. I guess that's going to happen. And I think that's much more kind of Tolkien wrote in such a way that he was not trying to, he didn't sit down and think, how can I create an allegory of the Christian faith? Lewis did that a little bit. But Tolkien actually seemed quite opposed to that way of writing. Like he said, this is this self-contained story, but of course we can find elements of Christian faith and theology in a huge way in Lord of the Rings. And so, yeah, that sort of creeps into my writing, obviously. Yeah. You asked something
Cool.
else. I
That's
have long
really
answers, and I have no idea if I'm answering the question you asked.
no, great. No, I love that. And actually, let me ask you one more thing about the craft of writing before we get into the publication. So how much do you plan ahead as you're writing? It sounds like there are a lot of surprises as you're writing.
Oh,
So do
yeah.
just can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how much of it is sort of do you think about ahead of time and pre-plan, and then how much of it is an adventure of writing it?
Yeah, this has been different with every book, actually. So I do plan, but I have a loose plans. So my favorite part of the writing process is the surprise, like when you're kind of getting into writing a scene and suddenly a character does something. It always sounds so weird, fiction writers, but I think this is a common experience that suddenly your characters are doing things that you think, oh yeah, that is in character, that is what they would do, but it's not what I thought they would do. Somehow that happens, but I'm the one writing it. So that's my favorite part, is just the discovery, and being surprised. But it's quite hard, especially in a series. Like my first book was probably the least planned. So a lot of fantasy writers, especially, I think, do a lot of world building in advance of writing, like at least kind of understanding like this is the world that this is going to be set in. I really didn't do that, and I didn't really know fully what I was doing. So I kind of did the world building as I went. And so when you read that first book, it's told from Dell's perspective, the main character. And really, as Dell is discovering things about Asdia, this world that they end up in, that's when I was discovering it as the writer. Mostly, there were some things. Obviously, some plot issues happen. I had an idea of what I wanted to do in that first book, and it totally changed within a few chapters. Books 2, 3, and 4. 4 is the final book. Those all required a little more planning, because now I actually had to go back and study my own book and realize what rules did I accidentally create when I was just doing this description of this place that they're in. So I had to map that out a little better. And in particular, the fourth book took me way longer to write, several years to finish the fourth one. And that took a lot of planning and a lot of false starts. So I had about 50,000 words cut from that book that just didn't work plot wise. So I did a combination of, I planned it out, tried to write, realized this isn't really working, replanned. So there was a lot of kind of going back and forth on that. So I think having a plan is a good idea, but I don't love sticking to the plan when I'm in the writing process. So it kind of messes me up a little bit, but that's the part of the writing that I enjoy. So that's why I'm doing it, is really to enjoy the process.
Well, that gets to my question, which is, like, why do we do these things?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that this morning because, as I was just mentioning, I think you and I have been writing around this, like publishing around the
Right.
same duration of time, and it's a lot of work. And,
It is.
um, you know, so I would love that you're focusing on loving the process. And I think I'm returning to that as I've been writing poetry, like
Yeah.
it's really easy to get caught up with the sort of publishing side of things and all of the things that you could be doing and perhaps should be doing. And so can you maybe let's pivot into talking about that, because I'm really interested to hear if you how the process of publishing has been, just the ways that you stay connected to the joy of the writing process. How has the publishing process been? So tell us what it's been, if you don't mind, and then sort of, how have you found it to be?
Well, it's interesting. I know it's great to talk to you because it reminds me that, oh yeah, I do enjoy the process, because there's lots of days where I don't. So then it is, why am I doing this? But I sometimes find that, like, as I'm working on a project, especially this fourth book in the series, um, because it took so long and I really wanted to, the series was like, my books end on cliffhangers. So it's like there needed to be another book. And then it needed to get wrapped up, and it was complicated to figure out how to wrap up the threads that were opened. So in the process of writing that fourth book, I really didn't like. There was a lot of time where it was a slog, and I was just thinking, oh, I just want to get to the part where I'm publishing this book, because that. And then when I got into things like communicating with my cover designer, and I've done this special project of a hardcover edition. We can talk about that, where I worked with an illustrator who did a beautiful illustrated cover, Will Kelly. Phenomenal to work with, and I got a map in my book for the first time, which is really fun. And so that's been. I can hold that up. I forgot this is on YouTube. Here we go. So really, this gorgeous 800-page huge thing. But yeah, it's really, really beautiful. So I
Congratulations.
when I was writing the fourth one, so this is the fourth, just as a standalone here. Um, when I was writing the fourth one, I was just longing for, like, oh, I just got to get this done, because, and I really had fun with the publishing process. But now that I haven't been working on a writing project for a while, so because I'm a pastor, it's not like I've got tons of time to just be sitting writing all day. No, so I kind
Right.
of do one thing at a time.
Hmm.
So if I'm in publishing mode, I'm not writing. I've just had to accept that. Like, I really used to feel bad about that. I wanted to be someone who's like, oh, let's write every day. And I do write every day in one form or another, but I liked working on a project every day. But I've had to accept that that's not like, I just can't do that. That's just not possible with time constraints of the rest of life. And so now that I'm doing publishing activities and been doing in that mode for so long, now I'm thinking, oh, I just can't wait till this is done
Mm.
and books get out there. And some of this is really fun and exciting, but I've got other ideas for other projects, and they're just sort of sitting there. And I'm thinking, oh, I just want to write again. I want some time. So I think it's tricky, because if you're a writer, I think that always happens. Like, you're kind of in love with this project for a while, and then it becomes, oh, like, this is killing me. Like, I got to finish this thing. And in particular, if you do publishing as well, like if you're self-publishing like me, the same kind of thing happens with the publishing process. I really like it. There's some people who really don't want to have anything to do with it, and it's totally fine. So they don't want to do, like, I do my own book formatting, and I really enjoy doing book formatting. It's kind of fun. And it's one of those things I can sit and, like, have watch TV at the same time as doing. Like, it doesn't require a ton of mental engagement, so it's kind of nice. Um, so I like doing that, and I like finding the cover designs and kind of seeing those come in and having final say on those things. And my wife helps out with financial side of things a little bit, which is handy. Um, so anyway, I'm saying a bunch of stuff. What you were going to ask about, like, what the process is
Walk
like?
us through. So walk us through the process. If you don't, I mean, if you
Sure.
don't mind, like tell us what program you use
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
but really, and then I just really want to hear more about this hardcover process, because it
Yeah,
just clearly like is such a project of your heart, and
yeah,
I really
yeah,
want to hear about. I think that's what you're doing the Kickstarter campaign
yeah,
for, right? Is the hard.
yeah.
Okay, so then can you just like walk us through sort of a
Sure,
101 of how you've approached
sure, sure,
self-publishing, and
sure.
then can you
Yeah,
tell us about the
yeah,
special project? Thanks.
yeah. So I write in Scrivener, and I used to do my formatting in Scrivener. Super hard to do. I don't recommend that. Um, and so once I'm done, say a draft that would go to an editor, the same as if you're working with a publisher, I just don't have to do any shopping of to find a place for publishing, because I'm going to do it myself. So once I've got that draft, I have an editor that I work with. So I actually met her at a writers conference, but there are editors you can find online that are freelance. So I have to pay for my own editing. Um, and she's really reasonable and wonderful. So, and very kind. So I enjoy that. And she's also edited my mom's books as well that I've published. And so I really appreciate that. So I usually go to her. It kind of depends on the project. My wife and now my daughter both read this latest book. And so I got a bunch of edits from my daughter and some suggestions. So that happened really before my editor. Um, but I think it's just super important to have a professional edit. I know there was a lot. I think it's better now, but back when I started this, there were a lot of people self-publishing who were just like, I'll just edit my own book, or I'll get some friends to do it. And that's how I did it initially. I had 10 friends edit because I had no money to pay an editor. And within 6 months after I'd recouped some costs, I actually hired a professional editor and put out a new edition of the book, which you can do fairly easily with things like print on demand. Um,
I was
so
noticing that I have a second edition, and I was
yeah,
wondering, it said second edition edited by Elizabeth Hugh, I think. And so
yeah.
is that
And
your,
she's
yeah,
no
oh, sorry.
longer my editor. She was great as well, but Lauren Kraft is my editor that I've been using since then. So she was excellent on the first book, but then I found somebody else. Um, yeah, so the edits come back, and that's probably very similar to what others might be used to. Just taking my time with all of that, with the editing process and the back and forth of those things. I think one of the challenges is that I'm getting complete final say. It's a blessing and a challenge, because sometimes I will ignore my editor, and then there's no one else telling me that's a bad decision. So by and large, I would say like 95% of the time, I'm just doing what my editor says. But there's a few times where it's like, no, I know my story, and I know this is what needs to be here. So that's a blessing because I get final say, but it's also a curse because it's sometimes good to have another opinion. So I will send my book even after it's been edited to a few others. My mom did some editing for me this time, which was nice. I don't always recommend family, but my family, like we're really good at critiquing each other and still staying in good relationship. So that's kind of the editing process. From there, I have a cover designer that I've worked with, and then the illustrator that I've worked with on this special project. And so I just kind of work with them. So that's paid as well. So upfront, making sure you have great cover design. A good cover designer is supplying you with all of the digital files you need. And so I don't have to worry about that generally. And Rosanna White has been my cover designer for all of my projects, my mom's books too, and she's been great to work with. Even the other day, I needed the cover of book 2 because somehow it had gone missing off my laptop, and I just emailed her, "Do you have it still?" And like within a day, yeah, here you go, no problem. So really, really great person to work with. And so then the covers are getting set up. Again, I do my own book formatting. I use a program called Vellum. I think it's Mac only. It used to be Mac only. So I don't know if it's on PC or not. But it is fantastic. Fantastic piece of software. Well worth buying it. And it has just templates. So you can basically just load your book in there. Like if you've written in Word, for instance, you can just import your entire book from Word, and it'll just put it into chapters for you, And then you can flip through and just make sure there aren't errors. You can add like ornamental breaks that are really beautiful. You won't see these in book one because I wasn't using vellum for book one, but by the time you're getting to book three, book four, the hardcover, all of that was formatted in vellum, and it's just fantastic. So you can do some really fancy stuff. So I mean, I wanted mine to look relatively plain, just because kind of book one and book two are already in that style. But yeah, it's pretty easy. And then you can just say, I want to export files out of that. And you can say, I want a print edition, and you can set up, I want it to be a 5x8, or I want it to be a 6x9, or like all kinds of things. You can do custom sizes, and it'll show you exactly what it's going to look like. It gives you the PDF. You can click, I need an edition for Kindle, I need an edition for Nook, I need an edition for Kobo, I need one for Apple, I need a generic EPUB file. Click on all these things, and it spits out all the files you need. So then you've just got all those files, you have cover files, and basically you can upload those to online services that are essentially going to produce your books and make them for sale. Or just make them so that you can order them and just have them show up at your house. So, and there's a bunch of services that'll do that. So probably the most familiar for people is Kindle Direct Publishing, so KDP. There's some front end work to set yourself up on those things. Once you're set up, it's pretty easy. The setup is actually kind of hard, just walking through like, setting up like banking information and all of that stuff. So, because they're going to send you money, which is quite lovely for them to send you money over time. And at that stage, it's just like there's an online form basically that you end up keep filling out every time you want to publish a book. So you're like, I want to do an ebook, and you click through and you can just put in all of your information and then upload your files, and then you can click on publish, and that is you publishing your book, and suddenly it shows up on Amazon. And there's similar ones for Apple and Barnes and Noble and Kobo. And there's other online services, like one called Draft to Digital, for instance, which will publish to all kinds of places. Also get your books as ebooks into libraries. Quite hard to get physical books as an independent publisher or as an independent author, into libraries, and quite hard to get your books into physical bookstores as well. So I just had to kind of say that's not important to me as much. I've had my books in a local bookstore here in Winnipeg. Sometimes they're currently not carrying my books, just some policy changes, but that's just sort of like, okay, I'm not going to see my books in bookstores, but if I can get my books into the hands of readers, that to me is more important. It was really cool to see them on the shelf. So I'm glad I had that experience of walking into a bookstore or doing book signing in that bookstore. We did a launch event a few years ago. But by and large, that's still tricky to do as a self-published author. People do it, but it's not the easiest thing. Does that give a bit of a thumbnail sketch? There's a lot there.
That's really helpful, and I'm so grateful for you being willing. I think we need to do more of these kind of conversations with authors who have different publishing journeys, because again, I think what I'm really, I just love how you've approached it. A lot of people have sort of stigma about self-publishing, and I just think that is circa 1990 and before, 1995 or something. Like, I think we're in a different era now. If you're if you're a traditional publisher, you might not see it that way, but you also are part of an industry and you want to sustain and protect. So I really think that the way you've approached it is very refreshing and excellent. And I do have one question, but you don't have to obviously talk about it in detail, but is about the money, because this book, for example, is my first book you see on the wall, and I keep getting author statements of like -11 cents. I haven't made much. I've barely broken even on any of my writing, and so but I have heard from my mentor, Brian Elaine, and others about, that self-publishing can actually make more financial sense. So are you able to speak about that at all? And maybe that's a good segue into the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, I would say that my writing as well, I probably break even. So, and you heard a bunch of stuff in there that my description about costs as well, right? So, um, paying upfront for editing, paying upfront for cover design, and then hoping I'm going to be able to recoup those costs. Like that's an advantage of if you do have a traditional publisher. It's like, oh, they're doing that, great. And if we don't make money, like the worst thing that happens is they drop me, and I actually still have my lovely book in my hand. So, and that's not a great feeling, but you haven't had the financial risk involved. So self-publishing, for sure, there's a financial risk involved. So I feel fortunate. I wished I'd sold 1 million copies and I had, but that isn't the case. But I feel blessed that I've broken even. My mom's books, on the other hand, she's done better than breaking even. So I'll actually grab one of them here. This was my mom's first book. So she writes in, you can see right away, it's historical fiction, and they're based on true stories. Really great writing. She wrote her first novel when she was 70, which is kind of cool. And so that was her first book. But she's done better financially than I have. And she's got 3 books out. So I've got a lot more, and it's kind of a break-even proposition for me. I think a big reason why is genre. And so I'm writing middle grade fantasy adventure books, and lots of kids still read actual physical books. Like, I think adults sometimes think, oh, kids, it's going to be like all digital. No, like kids read physical books primarily. And
Speaking of kid, here comes my 17-year-old.
yeah, there you go. And you need to kind of get into schools and libraries, and that's challenging. So one of the things that I've done which has been really fantastic, is I've done school visits and gone and talked to grade 4 or 5 classrooms, usually about writing and about my books. And that's been actually one of the joys of getting into this that I didn't know about at all. I wasn't thinking about that was even a possibility. And when I started, I thought, oh, this will be a good way to actually sell my books and hopefully recoup some costs. So sometimes the school will buy books, sometimes they'll let me hand out order forms. And so that's a way that I can recoup some costs. But actually the biggest thing about that is like, oh my goodness, I don't even love like doing children's stories in church. Like I've never liked that, but I've loved going to schools and being just that guest speaker who comes in for like half an hour and gets to talk about this thing that I'm excited about and passionate about. So that was a big surprise for me. I guess I'm sharing all of that in a financial question, because I think a big thing depends on what your goals are. We kind of alluded this to before, like, are you doing this because you really love the process? Because it probably isn't going to be like, there's a possibility you might be the next selection in Reese Witherspoon's book of the month. Like, I guess that could happen, but it probably won't. Like, you're probably not going to make tons of money. So, yeah, I think it's a real challenge. Like, if I was going to go back and write in the genre that I'm writing in middle grade fantasy adventure, or even in the Christian spirituality books that I've written as well, I think I would have, I might not have gone the self-publishing route. I've really enjoyed it, but the real challenge of distribution of physical books is still there, in my opinion, especially for kids' books. I don't know enough about the Christian publishing industry really, but from what I see as a consumer, when have I bought a self-published Christian title? I don't think I ever have. So those have been also challenging to sell. And I think some of that is genre. I've seen some poetry books lately that have been self-published. So I actually think that might be an interesting route to go. And I do think it's getting just more and more mainstream, probably in all genres. So Yeah, I think the financial question is important. Um, but that's probably true of like of everything. I think if you're a romance novelist, like probably self-published. Like, like that's an area where you can actually just go on Amazon and just see like what are the top 100 bestsellers in the entire Amazon bookstore, and you will for sure find self-published romance books. Like that just
Mhm.
that's just the reality. So I think some of it depends on genre.
Yeah, well, that's really helpful. And I think it's what I really like about your response too is you flipping it back to focusing on the goal. Because I think that the truth is, a lot of writers I know have other income sources, whether they
Yeah,
have a day job or they're retired and they have, maybe they want to make a little money, but,
right.
et cetera. But I think that there's more this allure of like worldly success, which
Yeah,
for me makes it all a spiritual practice. Like that's part of what I'm starting to talk more and think about more, which is like, if we are doing this out of joy, you're talking a lot about joy. And for me, it's a lot about discerning what God is calling me to write next. And like, you know, then if we turn it into like we need to be on the Reese Witherspoon list
Mhm.
because that's what the world tells us we should want, as opposed to
Yeah.
like enjoying God's beautiful creation, which may be taking a hike or it may be writing a beautiful novel or a fun novel, So I really think there's like a mindset work that faith-based writers or faith-informed writers need to do, because it is so easy when we go like, why are we doing this, to
Yeah.
just say, well, if I'm not a success, quote unquote, financially or in terms of accolades, then it wasn't worth it. And
Yeah.
I'm challenging that every day in myself, and it's hard. So that's
Yeah.
also part of why I need community. So I'll just say that about myself.
I think too you'd said like maybe this is a good way to get into talking about this Kickstarter thing.
Yeah,
It
tell us
is.
about the Kickstarter.
Um, so so you can like it's only open till November 2nd, I think. So depending on when this goes out, but it's you can actually go and look at it and look at what was there, even if people are interested in looking at that. Kickstarter, for people who don't know, is like a third party kind of it's a crowdfunding platform. So people can go and support your Kickstarter project, and they get what are called rewards, quote unquote rewards. So for mine, and there's lots of publishing projects on there as well. You can just go and browse around and find publishing projects. Um, for mine, people can get books as their rewards. So, and they're done in different tiers. So, like the lowest tier on mine is they can get the ebook of the fourth Del Ryder book. So it's kind of celebrating the release of the fourth book, which is the final one in the series. I wrote a little prequel novella, which is just this short little book. These are all kind of my proof copies that I've gotten in advance, which is kind of fun. Um, and so you can get a combination of things. So you can get that and the prequel together. You can get the complete series as an ebook. You can get the complete series in this beautiful hardcover. Um, so that's kind of what Kickstarter is. So this is quite expensive. So if somebody supports this in Canadian dollars, so it's actually going to be way cheaper for Americans, but in Canadian dollars, $75 for this plus shipping. And shipping is not cheap. These are actually printed through a service in the UK called Book Vault. And I went with them. They're not the cheapest, but their quality is super high. And they do have print options in the US that just came out, but not for hardcovers yet. So you can't do hardcovers through KDP, I don't think yet. Maybe you can. I don't know. That would be something to check. But it is really pretty cool. Like you can see like I kind of like that. That's what I think is cool. Like I know the illustrations are neat, but it's pretty
That's
neat.
awesome.
And having like
That's
the dust flaps
beautiful.
and all that, it's pretty cool.
That's really
Um,
cool.
yeah, so that's the back.
Beautiful.
The
Congratulations.
the oak tree is really important to the story. So, yeah, so you basically can order these. It's kind of like a pre-order almost. Like you can think of it that way. Like you can pre-order these things. The beautiful thing about Kickstarter from a publishing point of view is you get to collect all of the money that people give. So if you get supporters, you get to collect that money in advance of having to actually print and ship the books. So I'm doing all print on demand, including the hardcovers. They're just print on demand. So I only have to print what people order. I don't have to do print runs. So it's pretty amazing that you can do that. So I think right now I'm up to like, I don't know, I think 18 or 19 hardcovers have been ordered. And I just had to build in proper margins so that I'm recouping some of my costs. So this again really does go toward goals. Probably around the time I was writing the second book, I already had like the dream of, oh, I really want to do a complete series hardcover edition. And I think it's because I have a Lord of the Rings complete series hardcover edition sitting on not this bookshelf behind me, but my bookshelf upstairs in my living room. And I've had that since I was a teenager. And it's just a beautiful artifact. Have I ever sat down and read The Fellowship of the Ring out of my hardcover edition? No, I've never done that. I've got a little paperback version that's so beat up.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the people who are ordering this are people who are friends of mine and are like, yeah, that's really cool. I want to have that. And I want to support you as well. And I think others who are reading it are like, there are some people who just became real fans of the series. So only selling 18 or 19 of these doesn't sound like very many, right? But I can actually, like, I'm not quite to breaking even yet on my Kickstarter. But my goal was I wanted to make this thing. I wanted to make this. And I really wanted it for me. And I know that probably sounds like vanity. Like that's a lot of people called self-publishing vanity presses for a long time. There still are vanity presses. But I just thought, this is really great. And also the lovely thing that got to happen with this is I got to collaborate with an amazing artist too, which is so cool. So a big chunk of the cost is like the illustration cost. There's some interior illustration as well. That was a big chunk of the cost was supporting a real illustrator, a non-AI actual person who's going to insert some of their personality and their character into this as well. And I get to see my characters come to life in a new way. So I thought that was just going to be such a fun thing to do. And Kickstarter provided me with a way to recoup some of my costs before I have to pay for things like printing and shipping. So I'll probably be a few $1,000s behind by the time the Kickstarter's done. But I still have the opportunity to sell books, right? So I would think the majority of people that are going to read the fourth Del Ryder book are people who have read the first three. And most of those sales, I would imagine, are not going to be through this Kickstarter. I would imagine they're going to come through the other means, like through Amazon or through local school visits and sales like that I'm going to do. So whereas my other projects, I had to put out all my money up front and then hopefully recoup that cost. And now I've put out some money up front and I get the support from the Kickstarter, and now I can print and ship and hopefully be a little closer to breaking even, because this was just too big of a project really for me to pay for everything that it was going to cost. I wouldn't be able to do that. So it enabled me to do that. And I know others have had huge success on Kickstarter. Mine's more of a complicated project, but I know of other projects that have happened where it's been all they're doing is they're putting out a book. So we're selling our book and they can build some other fun things into like I did some bookmarks that are going to be given to backers. You can build some fun things into it. We're doing a launch party that's just for people who back the project and on Zoom. So you can do that kind of thing. And I think if you have low costs, like just a paperback book, or even just a paperback and a hardcover, you can actually do quite well. So I've seen like the famous one was Brandon Sanderson, I think, a fantasy author. Now he has a huge following. He's already traditionally published, but he switched.
My daughter loves him.
Yeah, he switched to Kickstarter, and I think he had like the highest selling Kickstarter in history. I think it was like I don't know.
Wow.
It was millions of dollars. Like it was just
Right. Right. Wow.
yeah.
That's a good point. Well, thanks for, I think of Kickstarter primarily for sort of nonprofit issues or,
Yeah.
someone's in crisis. And so, but obviously I was aware that, that people are using Kickstarter sort of for entrepreneurial projects. I have a colleague and a friend who made a documentary and used a Kickstarter for that
Yeah.
purpose. So I think it's, just really good point to keep in mind.
A lot of board games.
Yeah, I
There are a
see
lot
that
of
too.
board games on Kickstarter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's good. Well, Matt, tell us, just remind us how we can get your books after all this discussion about how you did it and, how can we find you? I found your book, Ryder, on Amazon.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I had to do a little bit of searching and so I wonder if that's also, we can talk about that more offline, but, I really had to I couldn't just put in your first and last name. So maybe it's also that you have, I don't know. Anyway, but the Ryder series is great. And so tell us where we can find you and where we can find your books.
Yeah, the easiest thing is mattbrough.com. And my last name is tricky for some. So it's Brough, rough with a B in front of it. So mattbrough.com is the easiest thing. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but I don't know how reliable those are these days. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way for people to just go to my website and then click around. It's not the best website. I'm not super proud of it, but you can find what you need there.
But that is actually how I found your books. I went to your website and then clicked through to Amazon. So that's a great. So it's Matt. It's Matt Brough.com. Is that what you said the URL is? Great. Well, Matt, thank you so much, and congratulations on this incredible journey you've been on. And thanks be to God, and congratulations on the hardback. And I really, I just want to just say congratulations on the artistry of it too. My husband is a wood turner and has spent a lot of time and money becoming an incredible wood turner and lather. And so I just really appreciate also the ways that you are being so thoughtful and skillful in the craftsmanship of writing and publishing. And I'm learning a lot from you. And also, I just know that you're such a generous person to other writers and supporting other people. So glad that we can, in a small way, celebrate your new project and your book series and your faith-based, and also your mom's writing sounds great. So congratulations. And is there anything else you want to say just before we close?
I guess I could also just say I'm trying to write more on Substack.
Yeah.
So I've had a podcast in the past and might restart it. We'll see.
Mhm.
But Substack is a place. I don't even know if I have a link from my website to my Substack page. But if you can get to my website, then you've got the right spelling of my name, and then you can search on Substack to find me there. But I've written a bunch about. I think the Substack is called Noticing Delight. So it's really kind of goes with my books that it's very much about delight and wonder and how do we take delight in the things that we're noticing in our lives and in the world. But there's been a bunch of stuff about this project and these books. So if you're interested and just want to read some of the things that I've written about around that subject, you can check that out on Substack.
And I'll give a plug to the YouTube channel that this is on, which is just yesterday I published a talk I gave about discernment for writing for your life on the YouTube channel, and talked about one of the things we talked about in last session is people are really interested in Substack versus Medium versus Patheos, like all the different places you can blog. And so again, I just want to say I'm grateful to you, Matt, for being a part of the Writing for Your Life community, because I think that this is exactly the point. We're sharing experiences, tips, encouragement, frustrations sometimes, and just really want to thank you. So again, I'll just encourage everyone to check out the Ryder series, which is really fun. And I have a 17-year-old, and I'm going to hand it to her next. So even though she's not quite in your age bracket that you said, I think she really appreciates this kind of genre as well. So I love that you have the young teens to. Well, I'll let you know what she sings.
She's about to age out of the real angsty stage, so.
She is. She's back. Good. She's circling back. So, all right. Well, blessings, Matt, and thanks again for being with us.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Take care.